Curse of the Kichai Shaman. Chapter 6. The Curse Explained. David asked the guy sitting up, "What does he mean I am already cursed?" The guy sitting up asked, "What is your name?" David said, "I am David Madur." The guy then asked, "What kind of name is Madur?" David said, "It is Polish. My great-grandfather came here from Poland." The guy sitting up said, "My name is Ralph Little Son. I am Pawnee. We came to Oklahoma in the 1800s from Nebraska. My cousin's name is Michael Rewiru. His mother is my aunt, and she is Pawnee, but his father is the last full-blood Kichai, they say. He comes from a long line of shamans. That is why Michael can see your aura. He has the gift of sight like his father." David asked, "What do you mean the gift of sight?" Ralph then asked, "Have you been digging up graves along the highway?" David said, "I just find them. The Oklahoma Department of Transportation archaeologists exhumed them to preserve the cultural information. Otherwise, they would be destroyed by the construction equipment." Ralph then asked, "You just said some guy at work spiked your drink. How do you know? How did it make you feel?" "The guy's name is Richard," David began to explain, "and he was acting weird. He sat next to me when I was drinking a sports drink and was being overly friendly, and when I came back from the toilet, he had moved, and he looked all serious. When I got to town, I could not drive right. I felt drunk and sleepy. I passed the breathalyzer, then I fell asleep on the way to the hospital for a blood draw." Ralph said, "Sounds like he gave you some roofies." David asked, "What exactly are roofies? I have heard the term before but don't know anything about them." Ralph said, "They are a drug used to assault women. It is a pill called Rohypnol, and guys put them in women's drinks so they can abuse them." David asked, "Why did I not taste it in my drink?" Ralph said, "They are sweet to the taste, and you don't notice them in flavored drinks. That is why they are so popular. Some asshole roofied my sister's friend, and he would have taken her if my sister had not saved her. So, this happened only once to you?" "No. It also happened at dinner when the guy was there also, but I made it to the hotel. I called my wife in Austin, and she said I was slurring my words. Also, the last few days when I left work in my truck, I felt like I was going to pass out, but after I put my head out the window, I felt better," said David. Ralph said, "That sounds like an old trick that human traffickers use to abduct Native women. They put ether. You know the chemical that makes you sleep? They put it on their air conditioner intake in the grill just in front of their windshield, and when they drive their car with the air conditioner on, they pass out. Then they can abduct them. There have been many Native women that disappear, and they find their cars. Most smart Native women who drive by themselves nowadays will open the doors, start the car with the air conditioner off, then turn it on full blast and hop out and let it run for a while to get rid of any ether." "That sounds like what was happening to me," David said. "This guy Richard sounds like a real piece of work," Ralph said. "He knows all the tricks of a human trafficker." Just then, the trustee of the jail came and opened the door to the drunk tank and told them that they were in luck. The jail was getting overcrowded, so the judge was going to come in the next day on Saturday, and they would be arraigned and could post bond and get out before Monday. Michael then sat up and began to talk. He said that the graves along the highway were Kichai, and that his ancestors were buried there. That if David's curse was from that site, that his father could lift the curse, but that he would have to bring gifts of food, money, and tobacco. That it would take 24 hours, and that they could go see him after they got out Saturday morning. Then Michael lay back down on the bench. David tried to get some clarification, asking how much food, money, and tobacco, but Michael was silent. However, Ralph told him that one bag of groceries, about $100, and a carton of Marlboro should do the trick. David told Ralph that he would like to do that. The next morning, the trustee came and got David, Ralph, and Michael out of the drunk tank and took them to a room used for court. There were about 10 people waiting there to be arraigned. Michael and Ralph were told if they plead guilty to misdemeanor drunk in public, then they would be sentenced to time served, which was a day in jail. They pled guilty and were released. David was told that to get out of jail now, he would have to post a $500 bond, and that charges would be pending until the court got the results of the blood test, which would be ready Monday by 5 p.m., but that the court would not get the results until Tuesday morning. So, if he did not want to bond out, he would be stuck there until Tuesday. David said he would pay the $500. He was taken to a window at the front of the jail and allowed to pay with his debit card. He was given a receipt and a card with the address of the towing service that took his truck. He went out front of the jail and saw Michael and Ralph out there. He went up to them and expressed interest in meeting with Michael's father. Michael and Ralph said they needed a ride, so David said he would give them a ride if they rode with him in an Uber ride service to get his truck. They agreed. The Uber driver picked them up and took them to the tow yard where David paid to get his truck out. They then went to Williams Food Grocery Store where David got a bag of groceries that included some steaks, a block of sharp cheddar cheese, some loaves of bread, a few boxes of mac and cheese, a few boxes of stuffing, cans of beans, fresh corn, fresh zucchini, fresh yellow squash, and a few boxes of candy. At the register, he got 2 20-pack cartons of Marlboro cigarettes. He went to the cash machine and got out $200 in cash just to be sure he had enough money to lift the curse. They then went to Michael's father's house. David asked what his name was before they got there, and Ralph told him, "His name is Nick Estaka, but everyone just calls him Nick." They went up to Nick's modest house, and Michael walked right in. Nick was watching a small old television that was hooked to a modern antenna box. Nick was an old man with long gray hair. He saw Michael and asked where he had been. Michael told him they were arrested and that they met David in jail. Michael told Nick that this is David, and his aura was many colors, and that he was in trouble and possibly had a curse on him. He asked if Nick would do a ceremony for David. Nick got up and walked over to David. He told him to hold out his hands. Then he took David's hands and looked deeply into his eyes. Nick said, "This is a good man, but he is in trouble. I will do the ceremony." Ralph told David to give Nick the gifts. David put the grocery bags down on the table and laid out the cash and cigarettes so he could see them. Nick then said, "I must fast for 24 hours to get ready. Michael, go see if the brothers Tom and Sam can bring their drum over tomorrow for the ceremony." Michael said, "Yes, father, I will go right now." And he left his father's house. Nick turned off his television, went to a box on a shelf and got a turtle shell rattle. He sat back down and started to pray in the Kichai language. Ralph told David that he was praying in a dead language, and that Nick was the only person who still remembered those prayers. He told David that the Great Spirit loves to hear prayers in the old languages. He then suggested that they leave Nick alone so he could prepare. But first, Ralph put up the groceries that David had bought, put the money in the box on the shelf where Nick had gotten the turtle shell rattle, and put the carton of cigarettes in a cabinet. Then they went outside where there were chairs around a fire pit. Ralph told David not to light any fires because Nick was calling the dark spirits, and a fire would chase them away. He explained that the ceremony was basically an exorcism where the curse would be cast out. David was intrigued with all this information. David and Ralph were sitting outside and talking when Michael came back with 2 men and 2 women. They were younger than Nick. Ralph told David that that was Tom and Sam Red Cloud and their wives. They had brought a large drum that they set up next to the fire pit. Ralph told David that for the ceremony, Nick would pray all night to prepare. He said the ceremony was simple yet profound. They would play the drum and sing while Nick prayed over David. The ceremony had to be done in the daylight because bad spirits thrive in darkness. They would start the ceremony at noon on Sunday the next day. David took in all the information. He liked learning about the living as much as he liked learning about those long gone. The Red Cloud brothers and their wives joined Ralph and David outside. Michael stayed inside with Nick to keep an eye on him in case he needed anything. Soon it got dark. The Red Cloud brothers did not talk much, but Ralph loved to talk, and he and David chatted under the stars. The Red Cloud wives brought out blankets and gave one to Ralph and one to David so they could sleep if they wanted to. Around midnight, David and Ralph lay on the ground with their blankets to get some sleep. David could hear Nick's droning voice reciting the prayers of his ancestors coming from inside the house as he tried to sleep. Then suddenly David woke up. He saw Richard standing over him with a knife. Richard leaped onto David and brought the knife down forcefully toward his chest. David managed to get his hands up and caught Richard by his wrists before he could stab him. Slowly, the knife was inching towards David's chest. Then he could hear Nick praying from inside the house. This gave him strength, and he was able to wrench the knife from Richard's hands and plant it deep in Richard's chest with the blade turned sideways so that it penetrated between Richard's ribs directly over his heart. Richard fell dead on top of David, and he was struggling to get out from under him when a young Native American woman he had never seen before rolled Richard's lifeless body off him. Then David woke up. He was beside the cold fire pit and the sun was dawning. He had been dreaming, but this dream seemed real. He was shaking and in a cold sweat. He could hear Nick still praying inside his house. Ralph asked him if he slept well. He was just getting up himself. David said he had a dream that he was fighting and killed the man that had spiked his drink. Ralph talked about how the subject of the ceremony often will have prophetic dreams on the night before. Ralph said these dreams are a powerful omen of the future. They sat outside for about 4 more hours until around 11 a.m. that morning. Then Ralph said he had to go, but would be right back. The Red Cloud brothers and their wives left also. They returned about 30 minutes later, dressed in Native American regalia, all of which was made from white deerskin and decorated with beadwork. They gave David a white deerskin beaded shirt and asked him to put it on, which he did. They moved the chairs back away from the fire pit and placed a single chair near to where they had set up the large drum. They told David to sit in the chair and prepare himself by clearing his mind. David sat in the chair, and the Red Cloud wives took up positions on his right and left. At precisely noon, the Red Cloud brothers, with Michael and Ralph, started beating the drum with drumsticks rhythmically and chanting out a song in a language David could not understand. Then Nick came out of the house, dressed in beaded white deerskin regalia. In his hand was the turtle shell rattle. He came up behind David and put his hand on David's head while shaking the rattle and praying in a language that David could not understand. The Red Cloud wives were doing a simple shuffling dance on either side of David and Nick. This went on for about an hour. The whole time, David felt an electric tingling sensation shoot through his body every time that Nick moved his hand on David's head. Then, after an hour of drumming, dancing, and prayer, they all stopped at exactly the same time. Nick went back to his house, as did Michael. Ralph, the Red Cloud brothers, and their wives left David sitting in the chair. They had taken the drum. Nobody said anything. About 15 minutes later, Ralph came back, and the others soon followed. They were in regular clothes, and they took the deerskin shirt from David, and he put on his regular shirt. The Red Cloud wives went inside Nick's house and started cooking some of the food David had bought. The Red Cloud brothers put the chairs back around the fire circle. Michael came out with the cigarettes and gave everybody a cigarette. David said he did not smoke, but Ralph said that it was part of the ceremony, and that he did not have to smoke at all but needed to take a few puffs on it so that their prayers would reach the Great Spirit while Nick was sleeping. All the men broke the filter off their cigarettes. Ralph told David to break his filter off also. They passed around a lighter, and all the men smoked a few puffs and exhaled the smoke toward the sky, then threw the cigarettes into the fire circle. Ralph explained that Nick would sleep until it was dark. Then they would light a fire, and Nick would tell them what he had seen by the light of the fire. The Red Cloud brothers gathered some old lumber and got the fire circle ready. The Red Cloud wives told everybody to come in and get some food, but to not disturb Nick while he was sleeping. They sat around and ate, and then waited for nightfall. The Red Cloud brothers did not talk much, save a few words between themselves. But Ralph talked the whole time to David. Then once it was good and dark, Michael lit the fire. Nick then came out and sat down with the others. The Red Cloud wives brought Nick some food and water, and he ate it silently. Everybody waited with anticipation. Nick finished his food and then began to speak. He said, "David, I am sorry, but I could not lift the curse on you. My distant grandfather was resting when someone touched his hand. He was angered to be woken up from his peaceful slumber. He went to curse the man that had awoken him, but that man had a pure heart, and he could not get in. Then another man came and began to rip him from his bed. This man had an evil heart, and it was easy for my distant grandfather to possess him. This is the man that is cursed, not the man that found him, but the man that dug him up. The curse on him will destroy him by making him go after the man with the pure heart. There is much trouble to come. There will be a big battle of good versus evil. David, if you keep your heart pure, you will win this battle. That is what I saw in my dream. That is all I have to say on the matter." David was stunned, but the whole thing made perfect sense. Richard was the one who was cursed. He had dug up the shaman. David had 100 more questions at least, but Nick said he was going to go rest now and left. Ralph told David not to bother him anymore with any questions. Nick had given David his answer. He had explained the curse and how it would affect David. David realized he had to deal with Richard on his own.